Good morning, friends. Welcome to Empty Cloud Monastery. I'm Ayya Soma, and I'm here with Ayya Niyyanika, our good friend who is currently visiting right after the Vassam. So we had a bit of a rough night actually here at Empty Cloud Monastery. Our best friend Stan, the monasticat, passed away. So we're still grieving in disbelief, but also personally, I'm relieved in the sense that he has been through so much suffering that it was just a relief that he's not into that much suffering as he was in the past hours. So yeah, we were discussing a little bit earlier because he died in the middle of the night. So right before puja, the Sangha gathered and we were sharing some reflections. And we were remembering our friend Cam from Laos was sharing how in his country they talk about whenever there's a birth, they go, oh, we're going to the unhappy house. And whenever there's a funeral, they talk about it in the happy house. And so there was a happy house, paradoxically, this morning, in the way that it's so much easier to bear one's own grief, one's own separation from someone we love, but it's so much harder to bear the suffering of someone that one cares without being able to help them. So this morning we don't have a particular topic, but it's just going to be a few reflections on whatever spontaneously comes from our lived experience. So maybe I'll pass it on to Ayya, who just came and met Stan at his worst and at his best at the same time. And how has it been for you, Venerable?
I feel like it's a real blessing to be able to be present, just in the realness of what it is to have a life, to touch other lives, and to relinquish a life. And so watching Stan want to move toward the water, sniff at the food and then pull away, decide my lap was a good spot to be. And then the next 2 days later, not really able to stand on legs, and the wobbliness, and not really sniffing at the food much, but still wanting the water, and then the expressions of pain, and just how quickly these things can change, and watching that holding to life. And then the gentleness when it's let go. And so I feel like it's a blessing to be able to witness it in another being, and in the care that you've given to this being. I got to see the pictures from Ayya Soma saving this wonderful creature's life 10 years ago, and hear the stories of how many times that life has been saved over that 10 years. And then, witnessing the actual passing. And we were talking about how, the next life, I think that's why it can be a gate of happiness, is that remembering the merits that this being had at this monastery and at Buddhist Insights before. I've heard from others how the cat would come and just be with, who enjoying meditation, sharing metta, teaching metta. How many good merits this being has accumulated in 10 years is favorable. It's favorable for whatever is next. And that is actually, that's what I mean, I see your actual happiness, not so much at death, but at the ending of suffering. Well, even this is a temporary ending. And how that can be a focus and a goodness and a support.
Thank you, Venerable. Yeah. There's many memories to be treasured of Stan. His nickname was Ajahn Metta, So it was also very interesting because cats, by nature, whenever they feel like it's their time to go, or that actually they feel that they're at the verge of death, usually they go into hiding, and that's essentially what a predator does, because when they are vulnerable, they become prey, and it's instinctive not to be, in the presence of people, because one feels unsafe, or in the presence of anyone, really. And it was really beautiful to see actually how, for Stan, that was not the case, and how he had found a place where he was feeling comfortable, and so that we were all able to, to be present, to be there, to be. He essentially allowed us to be present with him, and actually it was remarkable to see both Bhante Sudaso and Ayya Niyyanika interacting with him and soothing him, even though there was so much physical pain that he was experiencing in that moment. So it's interesting to see how a place of Dhamma, a place where actually there are people practicing the teachings of the Buddha, becomes this shelter of goodness for every sentient being. And it kind of also goes against the instincts the strong instincts that an animal can have, including humans. We're also animals. So the different instincts that we can have, and so we literally can go against the stream, even if we're animals. As I was seeing that in the past few days, and also recollecting, as Ayya Niyyanika was mentioning, all the goodness that he has given throughout the years to earn the Ajahn Metta name. And at the very beginning, when I had met him, he was quite skittish of people and was not very friendly. He was a little bit like, I don't know, maybe I like that one, but the other one looks a little bit crazy. But as he started living the center in Rockaway at the monastery, and then here at Empty Cloud afterwards, but straight, actually, I think after a year of being with practitioners, he started associating humans with goodness. So he was so happy and cheerful to see so many people. Actually, the more the merrier. I remember when Ajahn Brahm had come to visit us, the room was packed with people, and everybody was kind of on top of each other. And there was Stan that came, and he was like, "Wow, this is great!" So he started hopping on each one, and then going through these human tunnels, sneaking in and out, and then finally reached Ajahn, and I think he was kind of like, I'm the only one capable of getting away with this. All of you are stuck in the back, but I can have access to the Dhamma. I also have access to the Buddha. He would always go on top of the altar and sit right next to the Buddha and chill there. And during retreats, it was so interesting. I was sharing actually to the Venerables how at the very beginning of my practice, he actually helped me. He taught me how to sit for long periods of time and during pain, just because he would sit on my lap, and he used to be so still. So I would feel bad to move him. And so through that, he taught me how to endure the unpleasant Vedana. And then whenever he would meet people during retreats, even though a lot of people don't like cats, he would usually aim at the people who didn't like cats. He would always aim to the extremes, either the ones who were full of metta naturally, and he would just gravitate towards them, or the ones who were very aversive or hated cats, and he would just place himself on their laps and teach them metta. And it was remarkable to see how over the course of a few days, those those um, thoughts of aversion would be replaced with thoughts of loving kindness. And people are like, oh, I don't like cats, but Stan is different. That Stan is special. And so we have this moment of, we have this way in practice to influence each other, influence one another. And not because we have superpowers, but just because we are practicing the dhamma. And by practicing the dhamma, in a way, we get superpowers. We get the superpowers of the Buddha. We get the superpowers that are wholesome, the ones that lead towards the cessation of suffering. So, it's kind of like wearing the best sort of clothing, the best perfume, the best of everything. When we see someone who has those qualities, we are like, oh, give me some of that. It's the sort of the best ornament that one can have. And so in the same way, we can see that animals are very sensitive to that. They can pick it up quickly and they're like, this is quite good. This is quite nice. I always joke that, he was also kind of getting a little bit vegetarian. He used to go outside and start eating grass, probably because it was their tummy problems. But I like to think that he was just being a little bit vegetarian transitioning, even though he was a big meat eater. But it was always his first choice. It was like, give me some grass. He was also weeding in the previous monastery. Had a garden, so he was always not touching the vegetables, but always like picking up the weeds. It was really interesting. He's left a lot of goodness. And other things that come to mind is euthanasia, actually. So we didn't euthanize him, and at a certain point, seeing him in so much pain actually really made me understand why so many people choose euthanasia. Euthanasia, actually, the literal word, it comes from Greek, so it means like a good death, a sweet death. And I was reflecting on it, and I'm like, it's a kind of like a deluded death, I would say. We have such a hard time as human beings to deal with the First Noble Truth, to deal with old age, sickness, and death, and to really face it in its brutality. This was also coming to mind. I was like, I wished he could have a sweet death, but it's still unclear in my mind whether, clearly I didn't want him to suffer, but I also was wondering whether I wanted to kind of just not protect myself from seeing him going through through old age, sickness, and death, and sorrow, lamentation. But unfortunately, that's actually part of, unfortunately, actually, we can't realize awakening unless we actually see the Four Noble Truths. And that also means seeing exactly what does this really mean? What does this mean to have deterioration of the faculties? What does it mean to be attached to life?
I think it was the support, though, to administer the pain medicines, because you could see how he was able, although there was a little grogginess, there was also a softening. And that's when he could really turn his head into Bante's hand. Acknowledge the comfort that was there.
Yeah.
And then earlier, as you were speaking about the change of the skittish cat to Ajameta cat, it just really reminds me how important it is who we hang out with. Moving from whatever life Stan had before he got to the shelter, and then from the shelter to your apartment, and then to Buddhist Insights, and then to the monastery of Empty Cloud. Wow. to have that space, that community within which to do transformation. I mean, I feel like, I've heard you say, he got to monastic life before you did. And I feel like that's what monastic life is for. The Buddha tells Ananda, the spiritual friends are the whole of the holy life. And so for Stan to get that, and then to put it to good use, and to transform and become something loving, is a gift we can all look at and consider. How do we cultivate that in our lives? And then also those who received the gift of Stan in their lap, giving them a chance to practice. To be able to acknowledge these friends that we have and what transformative qualities they have for us. The work is still done, in the heart of that practitioner, whether it's getting them to stay longer in their sit or to start to give metta to some being that they didn't think they could connect with. Really, it's very touching.
Yeah, thank you, Venerable, for actually sharing that reflection. It is true. Yeah, Kalyanamitta is the entire path. And it's beautiful to see also how through our practice we're capable of influencing others, and others are capable of influencing ourselves, and creating the conditions for those wholesome qualities to arise in the mind. So I'm very grateful for Stan. I'm also grateful we had some rescue chickens that were killed a few years ago now. Can't remember anymore if it was 2020 or 2021. I think it was 2020 by the local fox. And it's interesting because people, usually have a little harder time to empathize with the grief of losing animal friends. They usually empathize empathize more if it's a human, but it's a little bit harder sometimes unless one is used to having animals themselves, pets themselves, to empathize. And even more so if those animals are usually animals that we have in our plate. So with the chickens, it was actually very interesting because I remember when they died, some of the comments were, "No, it must be really hard not to have eggs anymore, fresh eggs anymore." And I was just like, what a bizarre comment. First of all, actually, we weren't taking the eggs, we're monastics, so we weren't we don't take what's not offered. So the eggs weren't there, like they weren't farm animals. They were just some rescue chickens that people brought there. But it was also very interesting to see, if like a loved one, like your mother dies, you won't say, "Oh, it must be really difficult not to have like lunch every day or something," if you're living with them and they're offering you lunch. I don't know. Like we wouldn't say anything like that. But there is that sort of utilitarian way that we look at other sentient beings. And conversely, though, when we start having a different relationship, a close relationship with animals, we see how very similar we are to them. We see the sameness. We see how a chicken actually is no different from a dog, and no different from a cat, and no different from a human. And we see how they also go through all sorts of dukkha's and all sorts of sukhas and all sorts of grief. And actually, when the 2 chickens actually out of 3 were killed by the fox, and they were 3 sisters. And the 3rd sister, actually, we brought her to a vegan sanctuary here in New Jersey because she was so traumatized. So it was interesting to see after the death of her sisters how she had such a human reaction, like every single person who would see their siblings being tortured and killed to death in front of you. So from the joyous, they used to be the queens of the block, actually queens of the neighborhood. They would like walk around on they were free range, like literally free range. So they would walk around on the sidewalk and and in the neighbors' yards, and then the neighbors would come and go like, "There's your chicken," crossing the street, taking a stroll. We're like, "Well, they're not really ours. They just come and spend the night."
Why did the chicken cross the road? To get to empty cloud.
They were really confident. In fact, it actually took a year for the fox, who was a really clever animal, to hunt them down, because they were very street smart. I used to call them like the Rockaway chickens, the New York street smart chickens. So they had all sorts of ways to get away from the fox. And then the fox understood, after carefully analyzing the movements of the chickens, after a year, for some reason, I am gendering the fox as a he. I don't know why. It might be a she, actually. It's most likely, because it was usually they do it for their little cubs that are cubs. You say? I don't know. Little
pups to be.
Pups to be. Mini.
Yeah, could be
Mini foxes that need food.
Kit of foxes. So, yeah.
But anyway, so she was Yama was so in so much dukkha and so much PTSD, and like became someone entirely different. It was really, really interesting to see how human her reaction was, and how by going to the shelter also it took her so long. She was surrounded by loving people, but it took her so long to get acquainted and to overcome grief and try to figure out and understand what had been happening to her. So it's just so human to see that. It's also human actually to see before the delusion of going, I am the queen of the block, like where I'm immortal, I can do this, I can do that. The only thing I care is to eat. And actually they also used to meditate with us when we were meditating outside. It's really cute. One day we were doing a retreat with of lay people, and at the end of the meditation, we open our eyes and we're all sitting like this, with our hands like that, and there was Yamaka in the middle of us with the same posture, also spaced exactly precisely like everyone was spaced. And and we hadn't heard her, even though they were really loud, those chickens. So we hadn't heard her for quite some time, which means she had like sat with us for the period and was like, they're clearly doing something good. Give me, and I'd like to have what they're having. And but so at the same time, you see how both Hima and Yamaka was the name of the two chickens that died, and Stan at the same time were also capable of so many horrible deeds as well, whenever it was sentient beings who were smaller than them. They definitely killed and tortured all sorts of insects and creatures. And to see also that coexist in someone who has so many wholesome qualities of mind, also that makes it, if we're really honest, very relatable to see how certain things, certain aspects of our mind, certain actions of our experience are kusala, are skillful, and some others are akusala. And in some sort of weird way, they actually kind of coexist until we attain awakening, and we are capable of, we've done the work to turn it all to kusala. So by saying animals, I feel like by being in touch with animals, I think we can be a little bit more objective about what's going on, and also about our relationship towards both the skillful and the beautiful, and also the unskillful, because we're also unattached to usually the sentient beings that they're torturing. So we have a bit bit of a distance and are more capable of understanding how, one can be both an angel, can be Ajahn Metta, and also Ajahn Mara to a certain degree. So, yeah, these are some other things that that come to mind, but also the gratitude, so much gratitude of having the Dhamma to guide me through this process, to hold these emotions, to understand my limitations, to understand where I'm at, to understand, to also have a different relationship with death. I remember I was talking with Ayya earlier how, seeing the dead body of Stan has been so different than seeing the dead bodies of my grandparents. And not because they were necessarily my grandparents and they were human, but rather with my understanding of the Dhamma. So the identification, for example, with the body of my grandparents, with them, it's them, and having a strong attachment towards the body, and understandings that the body, like looking at Stan's body, that body is just being, no, it's aggregates. And so these aggregates are currently not, these khandhas are not currently a source of incredible suffering for him right now. And he's taken some other khandhas, some other khandhas, hopefully in Thailand. We're all like, at least I've been wishing for his rebirth in Thailand as a Buddhist, soon to be Buddhist monk. So that's my my wish for him.
And if we can have such wholesome wishes for all people that we can see with their mixed karma.
Mm-hmm.
What was striking me earlier as you were speaking was, the transformation that Stan went through of the skittish and the, and you mentioned his behaviors before you were, before you could get him to calm down in your apartment. And there was a certain level perhaps of tolerance, but also of equanimity to hold those transformations as they happen. And then the same with the chicken who was left of the three. The distress, and then being able to give that chicken an environment where she can heal. And how many times do we discount other people because we see their violence or we see their the hardship of their life? We see them as sick or as you rescued this cat on death row so that this cat could have a different opportunity. How can we do that for our fellow human beings? Can we do that for the planet? Can we hold it with equanimity and then move with compassion and wisdom? And I think there's more opportunity for the wholesome to emerge when we can give it that space and acceptance and understand we've been conditioned like this. These people who are behaving like that, these animals, this environment is behaving like that because of the conditions that have come together. And only if I have an open heart and embrace it, is there any chance for that to move, for there to be a different birth in this lifetime or in the next.
Yeah, thank you, Ayya. Actually, what comes to mind also in terms of that was also the fox, because actually, since she had been, now she's a she.
They, the fox, yeah, whatever.
He, she, they, depends. Actually, I've noticed
The
that
fox.
I've literally used, except for Zir, I've used pretty much every pronoun depending on the time of day, moment. It's very circumstantial. So my mind decides to gender the fox. But we had quite a long relationship, because at a certain point I was a bit of the rooster of the pack. So the chickens and I had created a way of communicating where, when they were in particular sort of situation that they kind of felt that it was dangerous, they would make a particular sound so that I knew wherever I was that I had to go out and scare the fox. And so there was this like kind of momentum, for when it come, and like the fox, like, oh, here's the psycho again, would start running away, and I would chase her out of the park, going like, stop doing that, probably to the amusement of all our neighbors. It's, I already look a little bit weird without having to run and chase a fox out. Remember one day I actually opened the door. It was dawn, and the fox was on the little wall across the the monastery, and she wasn't expecting me to come out of this door out of the blue. So she saw me and got agitated and fell from, from the wall on the plants, and then was like, oh dear, what have I done? And I thought that was a moment of cuteness. But anyway, once she killed the chickens, I'm so angry at the fox. I was really angry at the fox. And I remember we had some leftovers that we wanted to compost, and that we put, I think they were eggs, and that we put next to the compost bin. I can't remember why we didn't put them directly in the compost bin. But the morning after, I saw the fox that was there eating these eggs by the compost bin. And I went out, she saw me, I saw her. And we had that moment where, in the very beginning, I was like, oh, the fox. And then I saw how she was eating these eggs that were there, basically kind of rancid eggs, and understanding the suffering of the condition of the fox that was just hungry, and it wasn't personal. Like she hadn't, taken my friends out of anything, out of, just to make me or them suffer. It wasn't, it had nothing to do with any of us. It was just, as Ayya was mentioning, the conditions. And in that moment, I saw her and I was able to forgive her. Why am I angry at you? Like, understand that anger had no place. That it was just very absurd to expect for things to be different than they actually are, and how we create all this suffering in ourselves because we just don't understand, or we refuse to understand that this is just the nature of things. This is just how these processes go. This is just the nature of the body, for example, to decay and die. It's the nature of sentient beings to need to eat. It's the nature of carnivores and predators to kill and to get their needs met in that way. And none of this is personal. It's just how things are. And of course, we can develop the mind in order to not be in those conditions that then have as a natural result some really unwholesome actions that are a consequence of that. But at the same time, when we're seeing them, we can become so very quote unquote judgmental, and judgmental in an unrealistic way, I guess. Of course, it's good to say this is unwholesome and this is wholesome, or this is skillful and this is unskillful, to recognize it as it is. Killing is absolutely unskillful. But understanding also that this is the situation, that a fox will kill in order to eat. And that a fox is also really cute. I remember her eating those eggs and looking at her and seeing, you're just such a cute little sentient being as well. Like, you are probably such a good mother or father or whatever. And like caring also for the welfare of your little ones. And that's why you're here, like trying to get some food for yourself. And also that's why probably you caught the chicken, so that then you can bring it there and allow yourself and everyone else to eat. And so there's always this kind of like mixed experience. We see how, just samsara is this really mixed place of both wholesome and unwholesome. And I was listening last night while I was with Stan upstairs. I was listening to the Sangha panel of volition and intention, and also reflecting on the Christian saying, like, the path to hell is paved with good intentions, or something like that. And just as I was battling, with the euthanasia sort of idea, I was just reflecting on, like, how difficult it is to make sometimes kusala choices, because we just don't know what exactly is kusala. That's our experience as unenlightened beings. Like, sometimes it's just very difficult even to apply the dhamma. And so maybe we have the good intention, to protect someone. Maybe we have the good intention to save them. Maybe we have the good intention to it comes from a good intention, but then we might kill, to protect our family. We might steal in order to feed ourselves and be comfort. We might do all sorts of crazy things we see now with the war in Ukraine. There are so many like somewhat quote unquote good intentions that we can have, but if we're not skilled in the dhamma, we might really make awful choices. And we have to be really careful and keep studying the dhamma, keep understanding the dhamma, keep investigating the dhamma, and also allow ourselves to learn from our mistakes, learn from our fragility, and keep going.
I'm reminded of the first question in the 10 questions for a novice. What is one? And the answer is that all beings subsist on nutriment. And it's it's a really, really profound teaching. That it's and yes, we're talking about a fox with a chicken or eggs, and we're talking about ourselves with meal time, and we're talking about consciousness. We're talking about all of these things that nurture us because we have this wish for living. And the thing is, we're just going to keep doing it. So, we expect Stan to have another birth.
Yeah.
And we wish for Stan to have as supportive of birth as possible for the right ending of suffering, which is the end of the cycle of births. And so we really need to look at that nutriment. And it's not that we're cutting off our food supplies. As you say, sometimes these violent acts are done with kind of a mixed aspect. And I'm coming more and more to think that you can do something, such as each time we take food into our mouths, whether it's vegetarian, vegan, carnivorous, or whatever it is, there is some being that probably lost its life along the way. Now, this is the nature of having bodies, but even the beings who don't have bodies subsist on nutriment. And so coming to the end of us being part of this predatory cycle is understanding. So what is the best gift we can give? I think that is the actual looking at the Four Noble Truths, seeing clearly, stopping the cycle. It gives a sense of urgency to understanding, yes, it's like this. We subsist on nutriment. And if I can really understand that, I will stop participating as a being in this causality.
Sadhu. Yeah. And that's exactly what also Angulimala tells the lady that is in suffering, and wishing for the suffering to end by the power of keeping the sila also so pure and immaculate. Yeah, it's very profound. The Dhamma has so many implications, and to actually be able to promise that the path has of being capable of ending this process, that it doesn't have to be this way. Like on one hand, we accept it, and on the other hand, we also understand that there's an end to this, that it's possible, that it doesn't have to be our experience for eternity. That was precisely why I was wishing for Stan to be born with the Dhamma, to have the support of the Dhamma, to have the Dhamma as a guiding light, so that this cycle could end. And when I was shedding tears, because I shed quite a bit of tears, also the teachings of the Buddha of like reflecting on how many tears we've shed, and larger than all the oceans, and it was so just we really have the opportunity to really understand more deeply these teachings, not just like some cute poetry, but something very profound. That's just this kind of endless cycle where, unless we really dedicate ourselves to end it, we're just prone on reliving over and over again, over and over again, over and over again. And probably last lifetime, it was him crying over my decrepit body and so forth. And we kind of constantly switch and feel that it's novel and new, but it's always this old news. Faze has a question: is there a possibility of making karma consciously or doing merit for animals? Ayya, would you like to address this?
Absolutely. So when you're setting your intention, that's the beginning of the karma right there. And even the movement towards doing something that's caring for any being and for yourself and for the planet, or for anything that's a wholesome movement. The best karma is the karma that you're doing consciously. Because you're choosing, I'm assuming, something wholesome. You're choosing something with good merits and well wishes to it. So the more that you can align your mind, set your intention, make the action. And last night I mentioned an exercise of aligning the intention with the action, and how much stronger and more powerful it is. And if you experiment with that, you'll see that's true as well. When you set an intention and you do an action, how much stronger and more pure that action ends up being. And absolutely doing it for animals has merit. The Buddha does list, the various. It's meritorious to do this. It's meritorious to do that, and in that list, animals are included. Can you say more on that?
No, I think that's pretty good. Thank you so much. Yeah, if you all have different comments, you're welcome to type them in. Good to see different friends. Hello, Richard, Chittapala, Manal, John, Jayanta. Happy birthday, Jayanta. We're going to see Jayanta on Sunday. It's coming to the monastery. And Keith, Dan, Jewel, and Manal says, thank you for reminding us of the Buddha's words on how much tears we have lost across all our lifetimes, being more than the water in the ocean. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very difficult to bear. Also, this body is a burden. That was also, it's been the teaching of the Vasa actually for me, because my parents were here, and so they are 80 and going through all sorts of health issues. It's actually been a really interesting Vasa. All of a sudden, people that I cared, humans and animals, all going through this decrepitude at the same time, and all dealing with it in a different way. My mom actually deals with it like Ambapali pre-enlightenment.
Right. Right.
Yeah, so
I got the chance to meet Soma's mom. It was lovely.
So it's so interesting, because she was kind of actually going through all the different parts of her body progressively every day, and recollecting how beautiful they were in the past and how ugly they were these days. Not ugly how we usually use these terms, like, oh, this is pretty and this is ugly, this is a pretty bag, or this is an ugly bag, like unstylish, but really pretty in the sense of healthy, in the sense of forceful, in the sense of that having that, yeah, those characteristics of life. And ugly in the sense of the decrepitude, of falling apart, of unusable, of difficult to bear, like really this burden that we bring around. And so it was very powerful to see my mom not having, who doesn't really have much of the support of the Dhamma, but also said, actually, after staying here for a while, that she said that being in this environment made her realize that a lot of her suffering, she phrased it with, you managed to put some lightness in the suffering that I'm experiencing, which is very interesting. Also that, how we have this burden and how environments entrenched with Dhamma can lighten this burden up. And yeah, that's a beginning of the release. But yeah, so really seeing how, this beautiful and ugly, this difficulty, and seeing Stan having so much of a hard time, and also being very attached to life as well. It was interesting. He's always loved to eat. So yesterday we gave him this particularly stinky food, and like stinky in the sense of intentionally
enticing.
Yeah, enticing. Very stinky enticing for us. He was like, finally, like, we're close to my death, I can have some, like, the junk food instead of that, like, healthy food that you always give me. And so he was there, like, kind of like smelling it and going like, okay, let me give a few licks. And then he was nauseous, and he's like, still dukkha. But having that pull towards sensual pleasures, that pull towards still experiencing, that pull towards life, and at the same time having also the experience of the difficulty of bearing with this condition, and that there's nothing that can release that suffering that is external, essentially. And so what was really beautiful to see was the release of the suffering through human love. That was just so powerful. How the only times that he was able to find some lightness.
Lean into the hand.
Yeah, it was through the humans caring and loving for him. So yeah, we can learn so many things from. This has been intensive vipassana, a different type of intensive vipassana retreat.
Vipassana intensive, or an intensive vipassana?
Yeah. Yeah, so if you want vipassana in daily life, there we go. Yeah, so we can see all the characteristics of anicca, dukkha, and anatta right here, right there. But we can only develop that affinity towards our experience if we develop it through formal practice on the cushion. So we kind of get the mind towards that direction, and then when we're experiencing, we can go, wow, yeah, this is the characteristic of dukkha. This is the characteristic of anicca. This is the characteristic of anatta. And we start correcting our vipallasa, or distortion of view. We also start correcting our distortion of seeing the beautiful in what is not beautiful. Being so obsessed with the prettiness of the bodies. That's also another thing, cats, so we tend to think of them as these like such cute sentient beings, Stan had a really cute body. I always loved it. Very fluffy and nice, and it's such a big source of suffering. It's really, really ugly, not in the way that we think of it, once again, being ugly in that sense. Very cute, ugly body.
Well, and then there are the parts that are oozing from a sore, or the nose when it began to bleed, and these things that bodies do as they decay.
Yeah.
And I think that's got to be a part of our practice too, is preparing, each one of us preparing for death. Because if you don't practice, it's still coming anyway.
Mm.
Once we're born, we will die. And so practice now. Now, seeing these three characteristics for sure, and maybe that reaches the end of suffering before the end of life. And if not, still, how are we going to hold it? How are we going to be present for it? Can we be there to learn what there is to learn in that letting go? So, or are we going to be so caught up in the pain of it that we miss that beautiful opportunity of letting go? It said that, I don't know if this is true or not, but it said that those who have practiced the path, that time of death is actually a very big gateway for ultimate liberation.
Mm.
But it's not going to happen if you haven't practiced for it. So my big takeaway from seeing the life leave the body is to practice so that when I do that, I'm doing it with the grace of the Dhamma, really aligned with reality, not pulling away, letting go in a very appropriate and realistically aligned way. It's a big ask, and which is why we better start now.
Yeah. Thank you, Venerable. Comes to mind is also a while back, a friend from Thailand actually sent me this little video of this elderly lady dying at the hospital. There was a Buddhist monk with her, and they were both chanting. And even though she was in the process of dying, she was so peaceful and chanting and so gracefully passed away. And it was the most beautiful, actually, image that I've ever seen. And I remember thinking, what an incredible disciple of the Buddha, this lay woman. What an incredible Buddhist, really being so strong, but in not in like an enduring way. So strong in that like very comfortable, calm, peaceful way of letting go and transitioning and being supported by the faith. And I feel like these moments can really be very profound. Once again, we have to, in order to attain awakening, we have to see the Four Noble Truths. So we can't pretend they don't exist and try to find the end of suffering without even knowing what suffering really is. We have to really embrace it, and that way it kind of becomes lighter because we fully understand it, we see it. As Bante always translates, upeka as seeing closely. That's what we have to do. We see it closely, and then it doesn't shake us anymore because we fully understand it. And so that image always is like my aspiration. Like, how may I be able to have that incredible fortitude of mind of just letting go in such a beautiful, elegant, peaceful way without any fear, without any trepidation, and actually even being capable of chanting without any tears, just in a beautiful way. And Kevin asked, did Stan die? Yes, he died just a few hours ago. Okay, and Niranjan is checking in from Nepal. Good to see you, Niranjan. And we're almost at the end of our morning together, so unless there are any comments or thoughts or questions, we can maybe close it down. All right, well, we can end with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And see you all tonight for Mock Chat.